Hello. Today I'll be reading to you from my tablets. Here is the tablet. Okay, we're reading No Bad Parts. Okay, so introduction. As a psychotherapist, I've worked with many people who came to me shortly after their lives had crashed. Everything was going great until the sudden heart attack, divorce, or death of a child. If not for that life-jarring event, they would have never thought to see a therapist because they felt successful. After the event, they can't find the same drive or determination. Their former goals of having big houses or reputations have lost their meaning. They feel at sea and vulnerable in a way that's unfamiliar and scary. They're also newly open. Some light can get through the cracks in their protective foundations. Those can be wake-up call events if I can help them keep the striving, materialistic, competitive parts of them that had dominated their lives from regaining dominance so that they can explore what else is inside them. In doing so, I can help them access what I call the self, an essence of calm, clarity, compassion, and connectedness, and from that place begin to listen to the parts of them that had been exiled by more dominant ones. As they discover that they love the simple pleasures of enjoying nature, reading, creative activities, being playful with friends, finding more intimacy with their partners or children, and being of service to others, they decide to change their lives so as to make room for their self and the newly discovered parts of them. Those clients and the rest of us didn't come to be dominated by those striving, materialistic, and competitive parts by accident. Those are the same parts that dominate most of the countries on our planet, and particularly my country, the United States. When my clients are in the grip of those particular parts, they have little regard for the damage they're doing to their health and relationships. Similarly, countries obsessed with unlimited growth have little regard for their impact on the majority of their people, or the health of the climate and the earth. Such mindless striving of people or of countries usually leads to a crash of some sort. As I write this, we are amid the pandemic. Oh, am I allowed to say that? It has the potential to be the wake-up call we need so we don't suffer worse ones down the road, but it remains to be seen whether our leaders will use this painful pause to listen to the suffering of the majority of our people and also learn to collaborate rather than compete with other countries. Can we change nationally and internationally in the ways my clients are often able to? Inherent goodness. We can't make the necessary changes without a new model of the mind. Ecologist Daniel Christian Walls states that humanity is coming of age and needs a new story that is powerful and meaningful enough to galvanize global collaboration and guide a collective response to the converging crises we are facing. In the fundamentally interconnected and interdependent planetary system we participate in, the best way to care for oneself and those closest to oneself is to start caring more for the benefit of the collective, all life. Metaphorically speaking, we are all in the same boat. Our planetary life support system, or in Buckminster Fuller's words, spaceship Earth. The them against us thinking that for too long has defined politics between nations, companies, and people is profoundly anachronistic. Jimmy Carter echoes that sentiment. What is needed now, more than ever, is leadership that steers us away from fear and fosters greater confidence in the inherent goodness and ingenuity of humanity. Our leaders can't do that, however, with the way we currently understand the mind, because it highlights the darkness in humanity. We need a new paradigm that convincingly shows that humanity is inherently good and thoroughly interconnected. With that understanding, we can finally move from big ego, family, and ethnocentric to species, bio, and planet-centric. Such a change won't be easy. Too many of our basic institutions are based on the dark view. Take, for example, neoliberalism, the economic philosophy of Milton Friedman that undergirds the kind of cutthroat capitalism that has dominated many countries, including the US, since the days of Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher. Neoliberalism is based on the belief that people are basically selfish, and therefore it's everyone for themselves in a survival of the fittest world. The government needs to get out of the way so the fittest can not only help us survive, but thrive. This economic philosophy has resulted in massive inequality as well as the disconnection and polarization among people that we experience so dramatically today. The time has come for a new view of human nature that releases the collaboration and caring that lives in our hearts. The promise of IFS. I know it sounds grandiose, but this book offers the kind of uplifting paradigm and set of practices that can achieve the changes we need. It's full of exercises that will confirm the radically positive assertions I make about the nature of the mind, so you can experience it for yourself and not just take it from me. I've been developing IFS, internal family systems, for almost 4 decades. It's taken me on a long, fascinating, and, as emphasized in this book, spiritual journey that I want to share with you. This journey has transformed my beliefs about myself, about what people are about the essence of human goodness, and about how much transformation is possible. IFS has morphed over time from being exclusively about psychotherapy to becoming a kind of spiritual practice, although you don't have to define yourself as spiritual to practice it. At its core, IFS is a loving way of relating internally to your parts and externally to the people in your life. So in that sense, IFS is a life practice as well. It's something you can do on a daily, moment-to-moment basis, at any time, by yourself or with others. At this point, there might be a part of you that's skeptical. After all, that's a lot to promise in the opening paragraphs of a book. All I ask is that your skeptic give you enough space inside to try these ideas on for a little while, including trying some of the exercises, so you can check it out for yourself. In my experience, it's difficult to believe in the promise of IFS until you actually try it. Part 1. Internal Family Systems. Chapter 1. We're all multiple. We were all raised in what I'll call the monomind belief system, the idea that you have one mind, out of which different thoughts and emotions and impulses and urges emanate. That's the paradigm I believed in too, until I kept encountering clients who taught me otherwise. Because the monomind view is so ubiquitous and assumed in our culture, we never really question the truth of it. I want to help you take a second look, at who you really are. I'm going to invite you to try on this different paradigm of multiplicity that IFS espouses and consider the possibility that you and everybody else is a multiple personality, and that is a good thing. I'm not suggesting that you have multiple personality disorder, now called dissociative identity disorder, but I do think that people with that diagnosis are not so different from everybody else. What are called alters in those people are the same as what I call parts in IFS, and they exist in all of us. The only difference is that people with dissociative identity disorder suffered horrible abuse, and their system of parts got blown apart more than most, so each part stands out in bolder relief and is more polarized and disconnected from the others. In other words, all of us are born with many sub-minds that are constantly interacting inside of us. This is in general what we call thinking, because the parts are talking to each other and to you constantly about things you have to do or debating the best course of action, and so on. Remembering a time when you faced a dilemma, it's likely you heard one part saying, "Go for it," and another saying, "Don't you dare," because we just consider that to be a matter of having conflicted thoughts. We don't pay attention to the inner players behind the debate. IFS helps you not only start to pay attention to them, but also become the active internal leader that your system of arts needs. While it may sound creepy or crazy at first to think of yourself as a multiple personality, I hope to convince you that it's actually quite empowering. It's only disturbing because multiplicity has been pathologized in our culture. A person with separate autonomous personalities is viewed as sick or damaged, and the existence of their alters is considered simply the product of trauma, the fragmentation of their previously unitary mind. From the monomind point of view, our natural condition is a unitary mind, unless of course trauma comes along and shatters it into pieces like shards of a vase. The monomind paradigm has caused us to fear our parts and view them as pathological. In our attempts to control what we consider to be disturbing thoughts and emotions, we just end up fighting, ignoring, disciplining, hiding, or feeling ashamed of those impulses that keep us from doing what we want to do in our lives. And then we shame ourselves for not being able to control them. In other words, we hate what gets in our way. This approach makes sense if you view these inner obstacles as merely irrational thoughts or extreme emotions that come from your unitary mind. If you fear giving a presentation, for example, you might try to use willpower to override the fear or correct it with rational thoughts. If the fear persists, you might escalate your attempts to control by criticizing yourself for being a coward, numbing yourself into oblivion, or meditating to climb above it. And when none of those approaches work, you wind up adapting your life to the fear, avoiding situations where you have to speak in public, feeling like a failure, and wondering what's wrong with you. To make matters worse, you go to a therapist who gives you a diagnosis for your one troubled mind. The diagnosis makes you feel defective, your self-esteem drops, and your feelings of shame lead you to attempt to hide any flaws and present a perfect image to the world. Or maybe you just withdraw from relationships for fear that people will see behind your mask and will judge you for it. You identify with your weaknesses, assuming that who you really are is defective, and that if other people saw the real you, they'd be repulsed. Here we have a quote. This is me talking right now. There's a quote here by the Queer Eye star Jonathan Van Ness. It says, "When people asked me if I was ready for my life to change, I don't think I really understood what they meant. It wasn't just that strangers would know who I was. It was this other thing that started to happen to me. When I looked in their eyes, sometimes there was a little voice in my head wondering, would you still be so excited to meet me if you really knew who I was? If you knew all the things I've done? If you could see all my parts?" Okay, next section is called A Brief History. The monomind perspective, in combination with scientific and religious theories about how primitive human impulses are, created this backdrop of inner polarizations. One telling example comes from the influential Christian theologian, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this word. I think it's theologian, John Calvin. "For our nature is not only utterly devoid of goodness, but so prolific in all kinds of evil that it can never be idle. The whole man, from the crown of the head to the sole of the foot, is so deluged as it were, that no part remains exempt from sin, and therefore everything which proceeds from him is imputed as sin. This is known as the doctrine of total depravity, which insists that only through the grace of God can we escape our fate of eternal damnation. Mainstream Protestantism and evangelicalism, wow, there are some words in here I don't know how to pronounce, have carried some version of this doctrine for several hundred years, and the cultural impact has been widespread. With original sin, Catholicism has its own version. We can't blame this sort of thinking solely on religion, however. Generations of philosophers and politicians have asserted that primal impulses lurk just beneath the civilized veneer we present to the world. While Freud contributed important insights regarding the psyche, many of which are compatible with IFS, his drive theory was highly influential and pessimistic about human nature. It asserted that beneath the mind's surface lies selfish, aggressive, and pleasure-seeking instinctual forces that unconsciously organize our lives. Dutch historian Rutger Bregman summarizes these underlying assumptions about human nature here. The doctrine that humans are innately selfish has a hallowed tradition in the Western canon. Great thinkers like Thucydides, I don't know this person, Thucydides, Augustine, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Luther, Calvin, Burke, Bentham, Nietzsche, Freud, and America's founding fathers each had their own version of the veneer theory of civilization. Next section is called Willpower and Shame. The emphasis on willpower and self-control permeates American culture. We think we should be able to discipline our primitive, impulsive, sinful minds through willpower. Countless self-help books tell us it's all a matter of boosting our ability to control ourselves and develop more discipline. The concept of willpower, too, has historical roots, namely in the Victorian era, with its Christian emphasis on resisting evil impulses. The idea of taking responsibility for oneself and not making excuses is as American as apple pie. Sadly, our worship of willpower has been used by politicians and pundits to justify pundits? Help me. To justify increasing levels of income disparity. We're taught that people are poor because they lack self-control, and that rich people are wealthy because they have it, despite research to the contrary. Studies show, for example, that lower-income people become empowered and productive once they are given enough money to cover their basic survival needs. However, the very real fact, especially considering the economic effect of the current panini, is that the rug could be pulled out from under most of us at any moment, and that threat keeps the survivalist parts of us humming. Because this willpower ethic has become internalized, we learn at an early age to shame and manhandle our unruly parts. We simply wrestle them into submission. One part is recruited by this cultural imperative to become our inner drill sergeant, and often becomes that nasty inner critic we love to hate. This is the voice that tries to shame us, or attempts to outright get rid of parts of us that seem shameworthy, the ones that give us nasty thoughts about people, for example, or keep us addicted to substances. We often find that the harder we try to get rid of emotions and thoughts, the stronger they become. This is because parts, like people, fight back against being shamed or exiled. And if we do succeed in dominating them with punitive self-discipline, we then become tyrannized by the rigid, controlling inner drill sergeant. We might be disciplined, but we're not much fun. And because the exiled, binging, raging, etc. parts will seize any momentary weakness to break out again and take over, we have to constantly be on guard against any people or situations that might trigger those parts. Jonathan Van Ness tried and failed at drug rehab. I don't know what I'm allowed or not allowed to say on YouTube. Jonathan Van Ness tried and failed at blank rehab several times. Growing up around so much 12-step and seeing so much abstinence preached in rehab and in church, I started to take on an idea that healing had to be all or nothing, which has not really been my truth. I was trying to untangle a certain type of abomination. Oh my gosh, guys. I don't know what to say here. I don't know what to say. Oh, people say S-A, maybe DA, okay, and PTSD, and it was something that for me wasn't conducive to a never ever smoking weed again approach. I don't believe that once an addict, always an addict. I don't believe that addiction is a disease that warrants a life sentence. If you ever mess up or can't string a couple of months together without a slip up, you're not ruined. There are 12-step approaches that aren't so locked into the rigid beliefs that Van Ness encountered, and the groups can be a wonderful context for people to be vulnerable and receive support. Also, the 12-step admonition is to give everything up to a higher power can often help inner drill instructors lighten up or even surrender. The larger point I want to make here is that any approach that increases your inner drill sergeant's impulse to shame you into behaving and to make you feel like a failure if you can't will do no better in internal families than it does in external ones in which parents adopt shaming tactics to control their children. Don't think that this critique of willpower reveals that there's no room for inner discipline in IFS. Like children in external families, we each have parts that want things that aren't good for them or for the rest of the system. The difference here is that the self says no to impulsive parts firmly, but from a place of love and patience, in just the same way an ideal parent would. Additionally, in IFS, when parts do take over, we don't shame them. Instead, we get curious and use the part's impulse as a trailhead to find what is driving it that needs to be healed. Okay, that is where I'm going to stop because I don't know how much storage I have on my phone. So, that was me reading a bit of the book called No Good Parts. I think I might read some more in the future. Please excuse any parts where I did not understand. I didn't know how to pronounce the words. Maybe if you know those words, then you will know how to pronounce them. Fill in correct pronunciation here. Okay. It's been a while since I've made a video, so I figured I might as well go ahead and make one, even if it's just something as simple as reading. And yeah, I've been quite busy these days and dealing with a lot of stuff, so I think I feel good. I feel happy to be making at least something, and hopefully it was good for you guys. So if there's anybody who gets to this part of the video,